Hi guys, and welcome to tonight's Music Tech webinar. So we're going to continue our synthesis season here. We started off by looking at oscillators and amplifiers. We moved on last week to looking at envelopes, and this week we're going to look at filters and how filters are used to shape the frequencies of your synthesis sound. Now, so same drill as always. If you want to get in touch and you want to send us a question, you can do that during the Q&A section. Other than that, we're good to go. We're doing everything via Twitter tonight, so we're going to go solely over to Twitter for all questions. So chuck them over on that one, okay? So how the show is going to go tonight. So we're going to look at what are filters, how does a filter work, to look at all the parameters. We're going to look at subtractive synthesis, shaping your sound with filters, so looking how it works within the process of what we've covered so far and also what's still to come. We're going to do a live demonstration, so I've got some nice little clips set up for that side, so that should be quite interesting. We've also got some live audio that we're going to play as well, just kind of demonstrate some of these filters and just show you how they kind of fit in the grander scheme. And then, as said previously, we're going to do our Q&A on Twitter tonight, so please feel free to tweet us at MusicTech101. So first off then, shaping the frequency of your sound is such a big thing, and actually, and it can be used in so many different ways, and it's great fun to look at it this way. So how this kind of works, and I'll bring my mouse into the screen. So what you've got first is this high pass filter. Now, this is the high pass filter here, and what it does is it basically allows all of the high frequencies to not be touched, and the low frequencies are cut out, okay? So it's a high pass filter passing by any of the high frequencies. And it's the same with the low pass filter. This is the low pass filter here. And this basically allows all the low pass filters, all the low frequencies to go by untouched. And it's a really nice effect. So for instance, if you were using the low pass filter and you pulled it all the way over to this side, you would expect to hear quite a boomy sound, okay? So you wouldn't hear any of the top end, you'd just hear the boom. And if you was to do the same with this one, you'd get this really tinny sound. And that's the kind of idea of it. It's just shaping it in different ways. The next one is this bandpass filter. Now, the bandpass filter is this one here. And basically, you can control the Q of this. Now, the higher the value here, so it goes up to something like 100, the smaller the curve. And at 100, you actually get what's called a notch filter. This is a notch filter. Now, you can combine several hundred notch filters to make this kind of cone filter effect, okay? And the idea with the notch filter is that you're just chopping out very specific frequencies, okay? Whereas the bandpass is used for things like wah wah, where it kind of, you can pan it through and do an EQ sweep, or you can emphasize a particular frequency, okay? So these are probably the most common. I probably missed a couple out, but these are the ones that I use pretty much day in, day out. There are a few others, and I'm sure we'll come across some in just a second. So how do they work? Now, the parameters for filters are slightly different, okay? So depending on the kind of filter that you're using, it is going to be quite different. So for instance, if you're using a low pass filter or a high pass filter, you're going to use what's called a cutoff frequency. Now, the cutoff frequency is this dot here, and it's controlled by this parameter. So it's basically the point at which your filter starts working, okay? And you can sweep these frequencies through. So for instance, with this low pass filter here, the more you sweep it to the hertz, so 100 hertz, for instance, you'd get rid of all of those higher frequencies, okay? And that's really what it does. This controls the point of which the frequencies kind of manipulated. The center frequency is pretty much identical to that, and it determines the point at which it all starts working, but it's slightly different. The reason we call it center frequency is because you have two kind of ways in, I guess. Now, you have this very much dot that's in the center, and as you pin and pan it round, you're moving this whole envelope around, unlike this one where you're just moving this side of it around, okay? So that's the real difference. fundamentally, they do a very similar job. So the next one is this gain or resonance. Now, the gain for the bandpass filter is very much a cut or a boost situation. If you were trying to emphasize a sound, you might boost it up to +5 or so on. If you were trying to get rid of a sound, you'd cut it below -6 or -5 or whatever, okay? Now the resonance factor really comes in because that's what it's creating. It's creating this resonance that kind of resounds in the actual sound itself. You're emphasizing that thing. The resonance can be seen a lot more evident within the actual low pass and high pass filters, and which you've got this one here. They're slightly different. What is the Q factor for the band pass filter? Is the resonance for the actual low pass and high pass filters, okay? So they are slightly different, but that's basically what you're doing. You're accentuating the note, and as you sweep through the frequencies, the resonance goes with it, which is really nice. It's a really nice effect, and I'll show you that in just a second. Now, the Q factor, once again, determines how wide the envelope is, okay? So the higher the value, the narrower the envelope. So if this was 100, that'd be a really narrow notch filter, okay? The slope, now the slope's an interesting one. You'll notice here, and this becomes important when you're reading data from synthesizers, you'll notice here that it's measured in 48 decibels, or decibels in particular. And that's very important. You'll see things like 24 decibels, and that really determines the slope. So this 48 decibels is quite a hard slope. If you had 24 decibels, you'd have quite kind of a more gentler slope, allowing, you know, a little bit more easy. This is quite a harsh slope here, but that's the general parameters for these filters, okay? Once again, when we get to the demonstration, I will show you a few more of how these work, and we will demonstrate it on the EQ spectrum, actually, because it's a lot more visual to understand how the EQ, how the filters work on an EQ spectrum. It's not always the most obvious thing to understand if you're looking at a synthesizer. So, as said previously, this is the high pass filter. So the high pass filter, you're really looking at getting rid of all of these low sounds and keeping the high sounds intact. Now I have this really nice track that I've got set up in the background here. And in this track, it uses the high pass filter, and it uses it to kind of make the track seem very minimal, okay? So although in the actual arrangement, the track would have drums and bass and everything going on, because they've used the filter, it's made it sound like it's just the lead instrument that's being played. And then all of a sudden, the cutoff comes in, the bypass comes in, and the filter is removed and the whole track comes in. And this is quite a nice little mastering effect. When the track's finished and you just want to add a little something else, this is quite a nice way forward. So I'll just play you a few seconds. It's just so you can hear kind of the treble end of how this filter works, okay? So here we go, have a listen. And there it is. You can hear the very instance that the actual filter was turned off and the drums were allowed to play to their full extent. It was happening all the way through. I mean, let me just play that again so you can probably pick out some of the drum pattern that's actually happening. And you can hear it, the bass comes in, the bass drum is that much more punchy, and all the lower frequencies are allowed to happen. So that's the real impact of the high pass filter right there. So the next one we're going to look at is going to be the low pass filter. Now, the low pass filter is almost identical, it's just the opposite end, okay? So you're looking at very much removing all of the high frequencies and keeping the low boomier frequencies. And I have a couple of nice tracks here just kind of set up, so I'll see if I can play a couple of these. So now this track in particular, you're listening at the arpeggio synth at the beginning. It starts with only the bass frequencies and then gradually comes in and it gets brighter and brighter as more frequencies are added. So unlike the last one where it was an instant cut, you know, they turned the filter either on or off. This one is a gradual sweep using a bit of automation, okay? So let me get this back to the beginning and let me just play it. So it's just a few seconds. there it is. And you can hear the rest of the sounds all coming in. So the higher frequencies that time are coming in. That's really interesting to hear it like that. I've got another one here, so I'll just play this one as well. And you're listening to the staccato synth sound here. Oh no, I've got to just fast forward this one to 2 minutes. Let me just get this into place. Hold on, almost there. My mouse don't want to work. So have a listen to this. So this is the same low pass filter. So you're listening to all the low frequency sounds, and then all of a sudden you've got all the brighter frequencies. And I think this is just applied to the staccato synth on this one. Yes, as you can hear, that's just applied to that little staccato synth thing, and that's quite nice. Okay, so there's a low pass, there's a high pass. We've had a couple of examples of these in real practice and how they kind of work. So the next one we have on our list is this band pass and this notch filter. So once again, the band pass and the notch filter are determined by the Q factor. The higher the Q, the narrower the envelope, okay? So the example of this one is just a straight wah wah, and this is basically a frequency sweep. And if you're a guitarist, you probably use wah wah all the time, and it's such a fantastic effect. Okay, so let's just play this one. We'll move on. So this is the clean track without the wah wah. Here's the and that's nice, and you can just hear the band pass filter just being automated around. I mean, in this case, the automation is happening by the pedal, but you can just hear it wobbling around and moving those frequencies up and down. It's such a great effect. Okay, so how does this work in real life situations with synthesis? So we've looked at it very much on the EQ chart now, but this is a bit less obvious to kind of identify. Once you get into looking at synthesis racks, it's kind of like, whoa, how does that work then? So let's just go through this again. I'll bring my mouse into the screen. So we've looked at the oscillators, and you can see the kind of general routing here. So oscillator 1, oscillator 2, this is kind of oscillator 3, noise oscillator, the mix of all the oscillators together, and then before it gets to the envelope, it actually does the filtering first. Now, what you're going to notice here is you've got your cutoff point, so we know that it's either a low pass or a high pass filter. You've got your reso, which is your resonance, so you can push that up based on that filter. Now, up here tells you a little bit more. It tells you the kind of filter, so the low pass, and it also tells you the extent of the slope. So if you remember, the 48 decibels was a really tight slope. Well, this is a 24 decibels, so it's a bit looser. It's a lot more of a slope on this one. You have a couple more refinements, and you'll notice that on most synths, these kind of refinements are quite different, okay? So these are kind of adjusting the pitch ever so slightly as well. But then you also have an envelope on the filter, which is really interesting. So an attack, decay, sustain, and release ADSR envelope on the filter before you even get to the whole envelope itself. Okay, so that's really quite interesting that you're going to shape the envelope before it even happens. There's a few good reasons you might want to do that, and you just have to play around with the kind of shaping to kind of get the best results there. But that's the basic outcome of what this filter does. So it tells you the kind of filter you're using and the slope there. And then it tells you the cutoff parameter and the resonance, okay? So the next one we have here is our little prologue. Prologue's not so easy to understand. So you've got your different kind of slope and your different kind of filters here. So you've got a mix. So if we look at this, you've got a high pass filter here, So these are your high pass. Then you've got your low pass filters. So high pass, high pass, high pass, high pass. Then you've got some kind of gain reduction filter, which is called, oh, let me see if I remember the word for this, the name for this. It is a band reduction filter, which is quite nice. Basically, what the band reduction filter does, it acts as a reverse to the band pass filter, where basically, if you imagine putting a high pass filter and a low pass filter together, and what you get in the middle is all that's left, and that moves around. It's quite interesting. Then you've got your band pass filter, and so on and so forth. And you can select each of these, and this dial in the middle is your cutoff point, so you can zoom that around as well. Now, I imagine that it's the emphasis, which is your resonance. You'd have to check this out for yourselves, but I'd imagine it's the emphasis to it is your resonance in this particular case. And what you're going to find with most synthesizers is that the naming conventions are not always the same, which is a real downer actually. But I guess that's what you're going to find here, is that is the resonance. Okay. Now on your on the Logic ES2 synth, it looks slightly different as well. You've got two filters on this one. So filter 1, filter 2. You've got your cutoff point up here. You've got your resonance in the middle. You've got a bit of FM modulation, so you can change the kind of modulation of this effect. You've also got a bit of drive, which is going to push the effect up as well. Now in the middle, you have the different kind of filters that you can use. So low pass, high pass, some kind of peak filter. You've got your, now what did I say this was? Band reduction filter. And then you've got your band pass filter. So you can choose between any of them. Then you can choose the slope of each of those. And that's pretty self-explanatory. But you've also got this blend mode here, where you can actually blend the two filters together. And I guess this will come in useful if you're routing these filters in a certain way. Okay, fantastic. So we're going to move on to a demonstration. We're going to go over to Logic Pro and just have a little look at some of this stuff in action. Okay, so the idea with this demonstration, we're going to do visual demonstration of the filters on the actual EQ chart. Then we're going to look at routing and filtering multiple instruments together using the output. So that's still using the EQ channel. And then we're going to look at the different synthesizers and just see how they work within it. So it's going to be quite nice. Okay. So let me bring up that second screen. Just bear with me for 2 seconds while I switch them over. Okay, brilliant. So here's a track. And let me just solo this first one, and we'll just play this. Now, I've got all this turned off, and we'll just have a little look at each of the filters in turn, okay? Let me just clean up some of this real estate. So without any filtering, I've turned this off at the moment. Here it is. Okay, so now let's turn this on. So the first one we're going to have is this high pass filter. So we're just going to notch this right up so that all we've got is this really tinny sound. That's all we want. So let's hear it now. And there it is. So you can see that this filter starts very tinny, and then it gets brighter and it gets more depth to it. So not brighter, but it gets more depth to it, more bass into it. So that's the high pass filter right there. Okay. So the low pass filter on its exact opposite. Now let's turn down this resonance first. And I might go back to the other one and just show you a bit of resonance in a second. So let's do exactly the same first. And let's just cut all of these frequencies out and just gradually bring them back in. Okay, so that's quite nice. Now, let's put some resonance on. See what you reckon to this. And let's go back out again so we can hear this with nothing on. And let's do it without the resonance as well. And you don't get that kind of radio sweep without the resonance. So that's quite a nice little effect that you can use. And it just helps brighten up that area around the cutoff point, okay? So let's turn that one off. And let's just do the same with the high pass filter as well. Let's just turn the resonance on and show you this one. It's about here, I think. And then finally, just show you the slope. So we'll do a 24 slope just to show you that kind of roll off, okay? And it's just a little bit more of a gentler effect. Okay, so there's those two filters, the low pass and the high pass filter. Now, let me see where I set up. There's my notch filter. Now, once again, if you combine multiple notch, you'd get this idea of a comb filter, and you can move them around all kind of in sync with each other. So I'm going to just do that. And it's also good, if you're doing recording, it's also a good way of getting rid of unwanted sound as well on a particular frequency, okay? Not the most obvious thing to hear in this environment. The best one to hear is definitely the bandpass filter. Now, let me just show you the Q factor first. Remember I said, okay, if you put it up to its very highest, which I think is 100, there it is, you get this idea of just a very tight envelope, okay? In order to make this kind of wah-wah effect, you need something a bit wider, okay? So let's just have a look. Once again, the resonance in this instance is just a cut or a boost, okay? And then we have our frequency sweep, which is going to be like our wah-wah effect. Make that a bit wider. Okay, so there's those effects happening there. That's quite nice. I'm going to turn this off for now because what I want to do is show you something else I've been working on. Now I have two sounds here. So I have this nice piano and I think I have a drum beat. So here it is. Now over on my master track, I'm just going to set up, because it's the master track, basically everything has to go through it. So I'm just going to set up a filter this time, but just to show you that you can actually combine sounds, which is really quite a nice little technique. So let's just start with this one, and we'll cut all the sounds and we'll bring them all back in. So we're only getting those nice tinny frequencies, okay? Here we go. Okay, so it's fairly obvious. Let me just do a quick demo on the low pass filter as well so we get the contrast. Okay, here we go again. Nice bit of rumble bass there. We'll bring up the resonance on this one and we'll just reduce the slope again. Okay, so there's my little demo. So I just wanted to show you what a filter was in a more visual way. And I don't think you can get much more of a visual way than that. But let's move on to looking at the synths. Now I have a bit of a pop quiz question for you guys here. The question is what kind of filter does this particular synth use, the ESM? What kind of filters does it use? And let's just see if you guys can work it out. And maybe if you work it out, send me a tweet and I'll let you know if you get it right. So here we go. Let's turn the filter off. I need to bring up my keyboard on this one, actually. Musical typing. I wonder if you guys know the answer to that. What kind of filter does the ESM have? Okay, I'll do it one more time, see if you guys can work it out. See if we get a tweet for anyone that's got the answer. Before I give the answer away, let me pop over to my Twitter, see if anyone's told me the answer. No. Okay, so I'll give you the answer. It's a low pass filter, nice and easy, because you can actually hear low frequencies. Okay, tinny would obviously be the other way around. Okay, so this is quite a nice one. So we're just looking again. Cutoff resonance is a really nice, easy filter. Okay, you have a few other parameters which help shape the filter. The intensity, decay, and velocity here built into this filter as well. They are more to do with the envelope shaping, but for some reason on this particular synth, they are kind of interlinked with each other. It's definitely making it a bit brighter. Okay, so you can see that it's not particularly visual, and that's why a lot of the ways you have to work these things out. It's just by playing around with it. But the more you understand about how these things work, the more obvious it makes. The more obvious it makes it to you to see actually, oh, that's how that kind of works out. Okay, yeah. So basically, most styles have this cutoff. Most styles have this resonance. Okay, so that's the ESM with its low pass filter. Now, I wonder if we know the answer to this one. What kind of filter does the ESP have? Once again, now rather than calling it a cutoff, it's just called frequency on this one. And there's your resonance. So once again, the naming conventions, they're not always the same, unfortunately. Sorry if that's too loud. So a very simple filter there. Low pass filter, just using the cutoff frequency and the resonance. Okay, let's move on to the ES1. Now we're starting to get into interesting territories now. So this one here, you can shape it a little bit differently. So you can shape the actual slope a little bit more. So you have 24 decibel classic, 24 decibel fat, 12 decibel, and an 18. So let's just try those. I like that. Resonance. And let's brighten up the sound. So, high pass or low pass filter? Definitely a low pass filter. And can you change the filters on this one? The answer is nope, just a low pass filter. Now the next one we're going to get to is the S2. The S2, you can change the filters. That might be slightly more interesting. So let's bring this one up here. So here's the ES2. As said previously then, you have the cutoff, you have the resonance, have a bit of drive to push the sound a bit more, and then you can choose between all the different kinds of filters and their slope. Now the blend mode goes from left to right, so I'm just going to be using filter 1 for this particular experiment. And here's my first one, so let's just do the cutoff. This is using a low pass filter. is it? Yes. So it's very bright. It is a low pass. Okay. Bit of drive. Make it a bit more punch. Okay, so let's try a high pass filter. Let's see what the difference is. You could hear the difference straight away. It just gets tinny, more tinny. Okay, now let's try a peak filter. See what this one does. I imagine this is pretty much like a band pass, but we'll see. Okay. Band reduction filter. So let's have a listen to this one. Drive down a bit. Sorry if that's puncturing your ears a little bit. I can take that one and leave it. And then the band pass. Okay, so you can kind of see all the different filters and all different kind of parameters and action there. And once again, a lot of learning, once you get the basics of this stuff, a lot of learning what sound shaping is just experimenting with it. We know that we start with the oscillator, we start with the amp, so getting that drive going, then we move on to kind of getting the filter and the shape of our oscillator down, and then manipulating the frequencies within that shape is the next kind of portal. So I guess the next thing for you guys to do is just really play with this stuff and give it your best shot and see what you reckon, really. Okay, let's go back to the presentation. That's pretty much all I was going to do there, just to kind of demonstrate to you guys how this stuff works. So just bear with me for 2 seconds while I go back to the other screen. Okay, so if you've got any questions, please feel free to tweet them. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that was kind of informative. That's quite good fun to do, actually. I quite like doing synthesis. And I'm working now towards doing more bigger kind of areas, but we do have one more kind of subtractive synthesis area to look at, and that is the LFOs and kind of how they shape the sound and how they shape the movement within that sound. Okay, so as I said before, we're doing all our discussion tonight on Twitter. So we're going to try that. So it saves me pinging backwards and forwards to all the other areas that we were using. So let me just kind of get this open. If you guys got any questions, please let me know. Okay, almost there. Sorry about this. No, it looks like we're clear. I'll hang out for a couple more seconds. This week, what are we doing? So we're looking at LFOs and modulation. So that's our follow-on from our kind of synthesis. We've got about three more demonstrations to do this term before we move on to our next topic. If you guys have any thoughts of what you would like us to cover next term, please let us know. At the moment, we've had a few people say that they want sampling, so we're probably going to cater it towards the sampling, and that should be a bit of fun. We may even try out a bit of Ableton for that, because I quite like doing my sampling in Ableton. But let me know what you think. Once again, feel free to sign up to the newsletter. Feel free to come by musictechstudent.co.uk and have a little mooch around, or get in touch with us in any way you want. Let us know how you're getting on. I think we're pretty much done. I'm just checking my messages now. Everything is clear. No messages. Fantastic. So it looks like we did a good job. Experiment with getting your filters down and playing around with some more synthesis. And join us next week for LFOs and modulation. Okay, guys, thanks for coming by, and I will see you next week.